Hey guys, today we're going to be doing some X-Men MCU fan castings by yours truly. So in 2017, Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, if you're not aware, the company that basically makes all the X-Men and Fantastic Four movies outright in a deal that would bring all these characters over into the mainline MCU universe. And since then, fans, including myself, have just kind of been waiting for the X-Men to show up in something. We're getting the Fantastic Four later on this year, so I feel like the arrival of the X-Men is kind of imminent. But some fan castings, or not fan castings, some casting rumors, I should say, for the MCU X-Men have been floating around in the past couple of weeks. And I kind of thought it would be fun to do a video where we're kind of breaking down who we think could be in the MCU's fan castings. Basically, if it was up to me and I was Kevin Feige, who would I put in the X-Men movies based on the actors that we have working today? I feel like for my X-Men, I don't really have too many expectations, but I think the biggest thing for me is, number one, I want an X-Men cast that is kind of between both in universe and in real life, in between the age of the First Class set of movies and actors and the original 2000s trilogy set of movies and actors as well. So kind of that 20 mid 20-ish kind of age range. I feel like they're never going to be able to do First Class kind of better than that first movie, and I feel like the older cast, I don't know, man. I think it's just iconic. Don't really try to go and try to recreate that same exact vibe. I think even with the MCU's probably plans for the future, because I do feel as if after these two Avengers movies come out in the next couple of years, we are going to get a soft reboot from Marvel. They're going to look towards casting people who are going to be in these movies for another 10 to 15 years. So yeah, I think that's kind of the sweet spot for me at least. And so that's kind of the actors I'll be looking at. There's going to be some people that are going to fall outside of that range, obviously, but for the most part, that's what I'm kind of thinking. I'm also looking for, to be honest, actors and the kind of characterization that reflects the family matters and the family dynamic and the family drama that is, and like the X-Men. I think that's the best part of the X-Men, is that like it feels like a soap opera, like a soap opera between all these characters, especially I think famously that love triangle between Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine. If you haven't checked out X-Men 97, you absolutely should. It's a fantastic show that really does all these concepts that I'm explaining really, really well. And yeah, okay, so starting off first, the character of a Rogue. What I feel like I'm looking for in Rogue is a person that can kind of, an actress that can kind of play the highs and lows that Rogue kind of goes through. Obviously, her ability is, in some depictions, almost like a curse that she has, where she can't really get close to people, and intimacy is extremely hard for her. But at the same time, I think that that Southern Belle attitude and optimism really kind of shines in the best characterizations of her. And I really think we need an actress that can kind of play both of those things, that can play like the sadness and the tragedy of a particular power set while also displaying like this kind of unwavering optimism at times. And I feel like for that person, I'm not gonna lie, man, I feel like Sophie Thatcher, I had just talked about her in the recent video that I just did, obviously, would be perfect. It's the hair. I mean, like the hair is awesome. It just works. And yeah, I think she's fantastic. Like I mentioned, like in Companion, she's great. Obviously she's been in like Heretic, Yellow Jackets, other things like that. I think she would make a really, really fun Rogue, and I think a Southern accent is not really too far out of her wheelhouse. So I think she absolutely could do it. Next is gonna be Jean Grey. What I feel like I'm looking for in a Jean Grey is kind of a demureness, a kind of gentle spirit, a demureness, and then inside that demureness, a deep, deep, deep dark rage. I mean, obviously for the Phoenix, but I think that's just the kind of depiction of Jean Grey that we just need. I'm not gonna lie, it's what makes her interesting. I don't necessarily think we have to jump right into a Phoenix storyline right away, but it's that idea that she is so powerful and still human, that it's like you have all these abilities. It's hard to manage, it's hard to have control over, and I feel like for that particular version of her, Phoebe Denver, famous for the Bridgerton series, obviously, but the film that I'm kind of really like referring to in terms of why I think she would be great is a film called Fair Play, which was released a couple of years ago. She's fantastic in that film, and I think that she really like can play that version of Jean Grey. Like I said, the one that has that demureness and that has that like that soft, gentle spirit, but also like that fiery rage that can come out like just like that. I think she would be perfect. Check out that Fair Play movie too. So underrated, so good. And of course, if we're talking about, Jean Grey, we got to talk about Cyclops. I feel like for my Cyclops, I'm looking for a character that has a wantingness and a willingness to do good, kind of like a Boy Scout character that is not yet a man. I think Cyclops sometimes is kind of compared to, Cap kind of means to the Avengers, but I don't think they're really the same kind of character. I feel like Cap is more of a complete man who is pretty steadfast in kind of his values, where I think that the best characterizations of Cyclops are the ones that kind of show and depict him as a person that's learning and growing through being the leader of the X-Men. He's not perfect. He's going to make mistakes, and I think that's the most interesting kind of point of view for that particular character. And so for that role, I feel like this actor is a personal kind of favorite of mine, Harry Laudy. Laudy? I think it's Lottie. Harry Laudy was recently just in, I think, Joker. But what I kind of know him from is a show called Industry on HBO, where he's just phenomenal. And like I said, I think can really play those moments of vulnerability, but also this kind of almost false machismo that comes out with the Cyclops character sometimes. I think he can play against a female lead really well, which you definitely see in the Industry show as well. I think this guy's just great, honestly, and I think he just needs to be in more things. And honestly, this is my guy. I'm advocating for him, but I do think that he could be a really interesting choice for that character. I know that like Harris Dickinson is kind of the name that's been floating around recently, but if it's up to me, I think this guy could be cool. I think this guy could be really, really great. And of course, to round out the love triangle, we gotta go with the Wolverine. Now, to be honest with this, I have two kinds of frames of mind. Back to Industry. There in the third season, there's a character who was played by Kit Harington who comes into, I would say, how can I say this without spoiling? Blows in a way, close contact, forms a relationship, not a romantic one, but a relationship with Harry Laudy's character, and seeing that relationship play out and their dynamic to me is very akin to the best kind of, Cyclops, Wolverine, Jean Grey storyline. And in that regard, just seeing it in that context, I'm just like, man, let's just shift it over. Because if there's two actors are already working well in one thing together, if you can't just bring them over. We saw it in Gladiator with Pedro Pascal and I'm blanking on his name, the gentleman from Stranger Things. Now in the Fantastic Four together, bring him over. Sorry, Joseph Quinn. Bring him over. You know what I mean? Just slide it over. But if we aren't gonna go with Kit Harington, who I really think could be a fantastic Wolverine, I'm looking for a Wolverine that hopefully has grit, a kind of roughness about him, obviously, but I think at the same time who can play a deep sadness, sort of akin to a shelter puppy. And if we're not gonna go with Kit Harington for that, I feel like Cosmo Jarvis, most famously in the Shogun series in FX, could definitely be good. I think he was solid in that series. I don't think he was necessarily the craziest, but I think maybe he could be great. I think it's possible that sometimes you just cast an actor in kind of the perfect role and it just kind of takes on a life of its own, and I think he could be awesome. I think either one of them honestly would be great choices, but Wolverine's obviously a character that everybody kind of feels like can't be replaced given Hugh Jackman's kind of long-standing portrayal of the character. But hey, you got to move on eventually. So that's my pick for them. Next, Beast. If we are doing a Beast, which personally one of my favorite X-Men characters, I feel like we absolutely need to. I feel like I want my Beast to portray a kind of earnestness and intelligence, definitely, given that, Hank is obviously a genius scientist. But I think also most important to that Beast character is a character that can play a unique sense of empathy. Obviously, mutant powers affect people differently, and with his powers, they are extremely physical, which definitely affects how the way he interacts and acts with the world. And I feel like I want a character that can portray that intelligence, but also that kind, empathetic spirit that's really needed in the X-Men, given the things that they go through. For this person, I think I'm gonna go with Corey Hawkins. If you guys are not familiar, Corey Hawkins was probably most famously in the Straight Outta Compton movie from about like 10 years ago, but more recently in the Last Voyage of the Demeter, where I think he was just fantastic. Again, a guy that I really want to see more of, but I feel like he plays a doctor in the Last Voyage of the Demeter, can play that kind of particular role, and there's also a fierceness to him that I think obviously would come out with the Beast. And at the end of the day, I think they're probably going to go with CGI anyways for that character, so I guess it doesn't really matter who's in it in terms of like facially, but I think it could work. I think he could be really, really fantastic. I can imagine him in some little glasses and in a big furry face. That sounds strange. But yeah, I don't know. I think he'd be great. Corey Hawkins for Beast. I think that was a good show. Now, this one kind of predicates on the fact that Marvel could just get anybody, and I don't know if they could just get anybody, I don't know what the state of Marvel is in terms of actors and in terms of how they feel about Marvel properties. But let's just say it's peak 2015, 2014, and everybody wants to be in an Avengers movie. Let's just assume it's like that. The character of Gambit obviously needs to have that southern drawl, while also being able to kind of play or have that characteristic of, a hard outer shell kind of masked with mischievous behavior and kind of maybe hard to decipher motives, but deep down having a really, really great heart. And I think just even look wise, even though I didn't want to get particularly aesthetic with these castings, Austin Butler could, I think, do a great, great Gambit. I don't know if they'll ever be able to get him because obviously it's Austin Butler, but I think he'd be fantastic. No disrespect to Channing Tatum, but I do feel like maybe he's aged out of that role, unfortunately. And I think it was great to see him in Deadpool and the Wolverine, but bring on some new blood. And so I think, yeah, Austin Rivers. Austin Butler could be really, really fantastic in that role. That would be my dream casting at the end of the day, but who knows? And of course, we have to talk about Storm. So, Storm is an interesting one because I feel like we've gotten two really different portrayals of Storm. Obviously, in the originals with Halle Berry and the kind of, I think it was Age of Apocalypse or X-Men Apocalypse, sorry, with Alexandra Shipp, where one is kind of just essentially Halle Berry, and the other one is kind of more akin to her roots, which is the African goddess that we kind of see. And I definitely kind of want to see the African goddess portrayal, I think, in a better and more fleshed out light, something more akin to, again, referencing X-Men '97, a sort of regalness, and you know. She's a goddess, a regalness that is portrayed, but I think also like a kindred spirit, a kind of a bit of cheek, honestly. I think the Black Panther movies do a really great job of kind of meshing those two things, where it's like it doesn't go full blown Thor, the first Thor, where we're basically doing Shakespeare, but it also doesn't go where we're just gonna keep making jokes like about everything in any situation. Like he's right behind me in it, and they just do such a great job in those movies of kind of making things funny, but at the same time creating characters that do feel serious and sincere. And I kind of want to see that in my Storm. And so for my casting of her, I'm gonna go with Naomi Aki. Maybe you're familiar with her. She was in Blink Twice, that came out a couple of years ago, I think, or last year. I know her from the fucking End of the World, which is a TV show on Netflix. She's in season 2 of that show. Just a really great, intense actor. I think that just really commits herself to any role that she's in. She's also going to be in the upcoming Robert Pattinson movie, Mickey 17. So I'm excited to see her in that. But I think she could be really, really excellent. Again, an actress that I always kind of see just commit herself to the role. And so it just kind of makes me trust her with what the source material is, and if she could pull it off. So yeah, I'd be really excited to see her in that. And so Mystique. For Mystique, man, I think Mystique might be the best represented X-Men character in all the movies, which sounds crazy now that I think about it. And I know that Hugh Jackman was obviously Wolverine for so long, but he's one guy, so it doesn't really count. The fact that we got like Rebecca Romaine, who's I think just iconic in those first three X-Men movies, the originals in the 2000s, but then got Jennifer Lawrence in First Class. Honestly, we were really spoiled. Not that the other castings for Magneto and Professor X respectively and all the other characters are not great, but I just feel like those two are so 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 good. That being said though, what am I looking for in my Mystique? Dare I say Mystique? Yeah, no, but essentially that's it. I'm looking for Mystique. The popular casting rumor that's been going around is Hunter Schafer. I'm not gonna lie, man. Seeing a trans woman play a shapeshifter in a large scale production of like a comic book movie would be awesome. It would be so cool. It'd be awesomely honestly dope. And I think even besides that, even without all those things in mind, she's a great actress. She's a really great actress, and I think she could definitely play that character super super well. I think that's one casting that I've seen that I'm kind of like, yeah, come on, make it happen, make it happen. I think she'd be fantastic. Kind of wanted to throw out some kind of extra X-Men that I feel like we kind of don't see that often, but I think could be really cool to see. Kitty Pryde. I was thinking Caitlin Caitlin Dever, who's recently been a Booksmart, is also going to be in The Last of Us season 2. If we're doing a Nightcrawler, I think Dev Patel could be really, really awesome in that role, especially if you've seen Monkey Man. I don't know, there's a level of like a spiritualness that's portrayed in that particular character that I feel like translates really well to to Nightcrawler's origins and his relationship with God and his faith and stuff like that. I think Dev Patel could just also Dev Patel's just a fantastic actor. The fact that he hasn't been in a comic book movie yet is a bit confusing to me, and maybe it's just like maybe there just hasn't been a role that's right for him. Maybe he hasn't wanted to do it, but I feel like he's exactly the caliber of actor that the MCU kind of needs to keep going. So I feel like we gotta get him in something. So get him as Nightcrawler, and I think maybe as like Iceman, I would say Patrick Schwarzenegger. I think from Gen V, you probably know him from. He's also going to be in the new season of The White Lotus. I mean, ironically, he played a hot guy in Gen V, like a fire guy, but I think he's kind of that same kind of archetype of character. I think he'd be great in that too. And so I've purposely left out two particular characters in my casting because I had to think long and hard about what the implications are of casting these characters. I mean, Magneto and Professor X, the X-Men story is essentially their story. And I know there's been kind of ideas of like how to kind of rework, or if we need to rework the origin of both of these characters, especially Magneto, given that, in the original, he's a Holocaust survivor, which makes sense because, at the time period that it takes place, he could be alive and be a Holocaust survivor. And then retroactively, obviously with the first class set of movies, those are all taking place in the past anyways. But, the question is like, maybe you should change it to something that has to do with the civil rights movement and da 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 da. And to be honest, it was all too much to think about. And I was just kind of like, you know what? Let's just do the best people available. Let's just do the best people available. And yeah, and so I'm not kind of thinking hard about how this would fit in the context of a story. I'm gonna leave that to the writers and the people who are doing that. But I just want to kind of cast who I think would be the two best actors for that particular role, and if they could kind of play those characters properly. First up, Professor X, which is tough because you got to imagine who looks good in a bald cap, and it's a short list. It's a short list. But I can't speak if they would look good in a bald cap, but I think that this actor could really play an interesting version of this character, and that is Daniel Craig. Now, I don't know if it's possible to get Daniel Craig to commit to another multi-million-dollar franchise after he's basically clawed his way out of the Bond movies. But I think if the material is interesting enough, I think he'll kind of go for it in the same way that he's kind of doing the Knives Out movies. And I think he could play a fantastic Professor X. Again, maybe hard to imagine him bald. I understand. But this is just honestly one of our generation's most underrated actors. He's so good in so many different things. Layer Cake, Logan Lucky, but I think he's just a fantastic actor. And I think he could really do a really good Professor X. I think he has an earnestness, he has a care that he can portray, an intelligence, obviously a suave because he's James Bond. Like, come on, he's James Bond. And I guess we're keeping Professor X English, doesn't really matter. But I think he just could be fantastic. I think he could be so unique as well, and kind of a casting that no one really see coming, but I think could really pull it off for a long period of time. And so that leaves us obviously to Magneto. Now, again, I'm just casting the person that I think is the best available. The particular origins and the kind of way that that character's identity is framed and kind of told through the story, I'll leave it to the writers. If I could have anybody play Magneto as a villain, I would have to unequivocally choose Denzel Washington. I mean, it's Denzel Washington. I think he would do it. I think he would. I think if it was interesting enough, he would do it. And I think more importantly, he would kill it. I think Magneto, just in comic books, in the movies, has such fantastic lines of dialogue. Obviously, Sir Ian McKellen is fantastic as the original kind of Magneto, and I really like Michael Fassbender's version as well. But if there's any guy I could see in a helmet just preaching down to the humans of the earth, like Denzel Washington. I mean, I definitely reflect deeply on his performance in Gladiator from last year. I want to see him as a villain. I think he can just play a character, not even a villain. I suppose an antagonist of sorts, but I think he could just play a character that requires so much conviction and belief in what they're saying, no matter what it is. And I think there's just kind of no actor working right now that can kind of do that better than Denzel Washington. And so I would like to see it. Now, that being said, I realize that Denzel Washington is supposed to be in Black Panther 3. I don't care though. I don't care. I mean, like, let's be honest. If he's probably gonna be a villain, which means he'll probably die. And also, like, this would not be the first time that a person has started an MCU movie earlier and then gone back and played a different character. I mean, it just wouldn't be the first time. It just wouldn't be the first time at all. And so I think with enough of this space in between those two things and enough just multiverse explanation explaining away, I don't think any of it would matter. Denzel Washington as Magneto, please Marvel, get it done. That's essentially it. just wanted to talk about that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who would you guys want as your MCU X-Men? Drop some names. I'm really interested to see who you guys think would fit these roles. Well, once again, thank you for guys for watching. Thanks for coming to the channel. You know that I'm real. I'll see you guys soon. Be back. See you later. Peace.